Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Henley. Some are very familiar faces and that we see very often, others not so much. I'm Audrey Drotsky. I'm the MBA Director at Henley, for those I haven't met. Welcome to our family-friendly event this evening. We're very proud of these events. We get a lot of interest in it, and we have a lot of very happy kids there on the other side. I've just been there, and they are really enjoying themselves. For the students who studied here or are studying here at the moment, you would appreciate this. The first time we had this event, John and I, the dean, we walked down there to the Red Room, and we realized that never ever have we had people of this size in the Red Room. So they really enjoyed it, and as of tonight as well, they are in good hands, so you can forget about them for an hour or so and enjoy the talk that we have here this evening. I also just want to mention to you that you must please watch out for our emails and correspondence with you, because we have these events quite regularly. We have family-friendly. We try to have every second month. And we also have Africa Series events, which are very popular as well, where we get some of our alumni or other people who do business in Africa, and they come and they tell their real stories of success, how it works in Africa, what works, what doesn't work. So those are also very popular, so please look out for those. The next one is the 13th of July. So we would love to see you attending that as well. But that was the end of the ad break. So we are actually here to listen to Leon tonight. It's a big privilege for us here at Henley to have Leon here tonight. He's going to tell you more about himself. Just a few things I want to mention. He's the CEO of Agile in South Africa. He did an executive MBA at Warwick University in the UK. So he has a lot of understanding and sympathy on the MBA side. He's on the Henley Africa Academic Board as well. And he's an expert in telling you about life lessons and leadership and what works and what doesn't work. So, Leon, welcome to Henley. It's a privilege to have you here. Yeah. And over to you.
Adri, you didn't tell them about my greatest achievement, which is bringing you to Henley as the MBA director.
That
you
is true,
absolutely.
Yes.
One of my colleagues, we're very proud of that.
That's true. Thank you, Leon.
Pleasure. Thanks very much. So tonight I'm going to share with you some insights that I've picked up in the last few years of the work that I've been doing. And I think just to set the context and the frame of mind, I've got a very brief clip that kind of gets us all in the mood for understanding how the world is changing and what pace it's changing. You kind of get the idea there. And I'll tell you a little bit about my organization and myself and what I do. Not at all to position myself as an expert, but just to reiterate my credentials as a student of leadership and a student of parenting. And it's really interesting. I give this talk on agile leadership to organizations to try and get them to embrace the changing world and make sure their businesses survive. But as I'm staying current and researching and talking to organizations, it always brings me back to how do I prepare my children to navigate this world? So the talk this evening is really going to go between the commercial world as leaders, how we navigate that change, how we inspire that change, how we embrace innovation, then hopefully connecting that with perhaps what is our main role in life, which is that as parents. So my organization, Odgers Berndsen, has actually been around 50 years. Not a commercial break, just to give you some insights into what we do. Set up by a South African called Ian Odgers, who's a Joburger, in London 50 years ago. And we essentially are advisors in the boardroom, so responsible for recruiting chief execs, great MBA directors such as Adri, advising boards, but helping leaders also extract the best from their teams. So from an MBA perspective, I often talk to MBAs around how to navigate the world of executive search and get to the pinnacle of their careers. And then with organizations, I talk to them about how best to get the best out of their people. And I was in the UK for some time, and I came to Africa to run our operation here 3 years ago. And fell in love with the place. We cover the African continent. We're currently working in all these organizations. And I'm increasingly optimistic about the business opportunities and the fun of doing business on the continent as well. My background, very briefly, I was a British Army officer for 10 years. I trained at Sandhurst. I spent time in counter-terrorist teams. I spent time working for the diplomatic corps, and I spent my last few years working with the special forces. After that, I left and worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers in leadership consulting, and I've been at Odgers now 10 years running a variety of businesses. I give talks such as this around the world. It's my first at Henley, actually, which I'm very delighted to do, but Oxford, Cambridge, UCT, Stellenbosch, and Henley. I only work with the good business schools. But perhaps more importantly, this is really me. So I run the organization by day, but I couldn't dare call myself the CEO of this organization. I'm the co-CEO, and this is my family, and this is a real central part of who I am. And one of the themes I'm going to touch upon is leaders, and in assessing leaders and being as effective as you possibly can, it's about being authentic to who we are. And when it's interesting, when I'm talking to clients and candidates about themselves, they don't raise their family in the first 5 minutes. I have questions about them because this is such a core part of who we are, a core part of what drives us. I think it's good to share that and bring it to the workplace. But as you can see, my wife's not here tonight, so I can say I'm a good husband. I try to be, and I certainly try to be a good father. But it's constantly a balance. And I think back to my executive MBA at Warwick, and we had one of the alumni come in at the first weekend module, and he just said the MBA is a constant balance between everything you love. Your kids, your wife, your work, your studies, your girlfriend. He didn't say that, but it was good to get it out there. But I think when I look at MBAs, and Adri, please forgive me, I don't believe it's so much the academic content that's a differentiator. I think it's the ability to manage all these aspects of your life and keep going. I've got a colleague of mine who I'm sponsoring through an MBA program right now, and I just asked her how she was yesterday. She just burst into tears. And I completely empathized because we've all been there trying to manage all these aspects of our life. You've got a deadline at work, your boyfriend, wife, husband's giving you a hard time, and you've also got an assignment or an exam. So that's why I respect MBAs, and that's why I also believe it's still a great qualification to differentiate us as people that can be robust leaders. And just very quickly, they're my two boys. I love them. That's what drives me, So what do we do? What is agile leadership? Edwin G. Booz. Can anybody tell me who that is? Well done, yeah. So 102 years ago, Booz came up with this, and I think it's as relevant today. So during my day job, when I'm not advising boards, I'm identifying leaders for organizations. And for me, I think it's the most important professional service. You can hire a lawyer, an accountant, which you need, a commercial banker, but if you get the right person in an organization, things go well. When you get the wrong person, we all know the impact. And I'm not having any party political broadcast here because I'm British and it's not a great time at the moment back home. But it's also around the world. When we get it right, you really get it right. And you can see the impact on an organization and on a country. But we all know what's happening. But I think, again, it just underlines the importance as leaders, the influence we can have on organizations, on people, on teams, on society. So at any level, we have to take that responsibility seriously. And perhaps on a slightly less controversial, I'm from Manchester. I'm a big Manchester United fan. And they're not even a better example or case study of the difference between leadership. With exactly the same set of resources, the same culture, the same history, we go from being the most successful club in the world, in terms of winning, in terms of delivering shareholder value, to one of the also-rans. And, this is very emotional for me. It's very difficult. And now we've got Jose Mourinho, and you think, we're going to start winning. But at what cost is it going to compromise the values of our club? So I'm not going to talk about football all night, but I like to draw case studies and comparisons from the business world that we can all understand. Equally, no strategy, no style operates in isolation. We all operate in a certain context, and that context drives the style and skills that are required to succeed. So how's South Africa doing? It's not interactive, don't worry. But, we could look at that. I did an interview with a journalist in London commenting on what it's like being a Brit abroad at the moment. But actually, if you look at the headlines in South Africa, you could get very quickly depressed. The reality of when I talk to leaders and I meet young people, I'm so enthused and optimistic about the future. None more so than when I go into the business schools and look at the young MBAs coming out. But that doesn't make good copy, doesn't make good headlines. So we can focus. But actually, that is the context we're operating in. That is the reality. And again, around the world, there are severe challenges that we're all facing. We can look at Brexit. I was back in Europe for a global board meeting in Frankfurt. I was in London for 2 days and I couldn't wait to leave. The fear around the Brexit vote, that was before they made the wrong decision. I'll tell you which way they should have voted. The fear, families arguing. My mother and my sister weren't talking to each other because they're opposing views. It really separated a country. And I've been here kind of laughing at South African democracy for the last 3 years as an observer that can't actively participate. As an investor, I follow with interest. But here, where I voted, you can see how challenging it can be when your democracies are less than perfect. And guess what? They're all less than perfect. And all these economies around the world, I had my colleagues from Brazil, Russia, India, the UK, the US, all of them had such a challenging landscape to navigate. There were only the Canadians that were quite smug because they've got a pretty cool PM at the moment. But everyone else had a real challenge. And I actually came back to South Africa feeling hugely optimistic. And I would have exchanged the scenarios and the cards that we got here in South Africa and Africa to play with, to grow our businesses and grow our lives, than my colleagues back in Europe, possibly Canada. So agility and agile leaders is not a new concept. These aren't my words. I'll come on to the Agile Manifesto shortly. But essentially, I think that proverb really articulates how businesses have to start navigating the world now. I was in Durban this morning, and I got several clients there, and I won't name them, they'll be breaching confidence, but with massive infrastructures based in Durban. And when the situation changes, so the EU stop buying their product, legislation changes, there's a drought, their world has changed, but is their business agile and able to adapt to the new conditions? The answer right now is no. You've got a massive infrastructure and resource to pay, but the world has changed, and they're not equipped with the skills to navigate it. So I'm doing a series of workshops at middle management and senior management to say, just because the world changes, we still have to adapt. And across the world, we've got a massive uncertain future. Perhaps in no other time in history has there been such a changing dynamic. Therefore, agility is key. And I will link this to parenting towards the end of the presentation. But that's the world our kids are growing up into as well. We're trying to lead businesses, lead departments, grow our careers. And in 20 years' time, it's going to be even more different. But I think if you can embrace this, these are one of the key skill sets that we can bring to bear, but we can pass on to our children as well. So yes, there's a lot of change. Adaptability is key. Europe, 3 weeks ago, the UK, I'd have bet my house and all my investments it was a great place to be. Now, that situation has changed, beyond my control. Classic MBA learning, so what? You start crying, put your head in the sand. No, where's the next opportunity? What can we do? Emotional intelligence. Sadly, there are lots of MBAs around the world. Everybody in this room, I will dare to say, is technically competent, professionally competent. So what? There's hundreds of us. What's the differentiating factor? It's the ability to embrace emotional intelligence, to extract the best out of people, to demonstrate empathy, to understand how to communicate. And we've all worked with leaders that can't do it. Any accountants or engineers in the room? Just a question. And we've all worked with HR people that perhaps are very good at it. And the truth is that the best way forward is embracing the technical competence and the hard facts, but understanding that human beings are our greatest resource in any organization. And they are not machines. They're not one size fits all. And the more we can understand and empathize and get the best out of them, the better they'll perform and the better we'll feel about ourselves by being truly good leaders. And embracing innovation. The world is changing. What worked 2 weeks ago does not work now. And that the pace of change, it's scary. These slides I did a few weeks ago, they're out of date. I got off the plane, I had to change a few. This is the pace of change that we're operating in. And if you can't handle that, you're not going to survive. The one constant we can rely on, sadly, without being morbid, is the end of our years, going off to a better place, and that life is going to constantly be changing. So, interestingly, I was asked to do this talk about 6 weeks ago for an organization, and I put my slides together, I did my research, and then the Sunday evening before I delivered it, I listened to the Harvard Business Review podcasts. I thoroughly recommend it. And these guys had done a new paper on exactly this, agile leadership, and they gave a 25-minute lecture. And this is based on an academic paper discussing what the agile values and principles are. And I think it's a really good baseline to understand. And I always say, when you're kind of inculcating a high-performance culture, you're teaching around leadership, essentially there's so many lessons that we bring back to our home, which is really our most important role, that you can apply. And I'll draw those comparisons later. But essentially, people over processes and tools. We've all worked with people, and we might be the type of people that say, the process must be this way. Well, what if that's not the best way? What if that worked yesterday doesn't work today? Don't be a slave to that. I liken that in my wife when she reads my son's school report. She goes straight to the academic results. Doesn't care what type of leader he is, how polite he is, what he's like at sport and all the arts that actually make him an interesting person and a nice colleague. you got 51% in maths, and she's angry. And that's very much my wife's French. It's a French mindset in terms of how they judge leaders. That's changing. But we all know people in work that do that. Valuing people. People are our greatest commodity. It's worth getting to know them. It's worth what makes them tick. It makes them feel valued. It makes them more effective. We can't just rely on machinery, and because the spreadsheet says do this, they're going to do that. We've got to understand that different things make different people tick. Documentation. Who here is responsible for tenders? Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Hundreds of pages of going through it. Agile theory tells us, okay, let's just cut through the paperwork. Let's trial it on a smaller scale. I have a division in my business that's a separate brand, and we run trials. We launched a new product offering in about 4 months. I was really proud. Agile theory says I should have done it in 4 weeks. How much business did I lose in 5 months? Actually, quite a lot. So if we don't risk the whole business model on being agile, but we take small elements, trial it, run it. If it works, then we roll it out to the rest of the business. And really, you've got to respond to change. You can't just say, this is what we've got, do you want it? Henry Ford said you could have any color car you wanted as long as it was black. The world is no longer like that. You can get what you want. You can go shopping elsewhere. You can get online. And listen to your customers, your clients. The contract says this, but actually your client needs this. And we just got to exercise that flexibility. This was a very interesting survey from the Economist Intelligence Unit that showed what were the most important traits in leadership in terms of getting results. And it's there to see. And as I have a sales force in my team, and I like to think I'm connected to people. But the first thing I look at in the morning and where I go to bed is the numbers, cash flows. So the fact that bringing in the numbers is 10% down there in terms of being the least important was a bit of a surprise to me. But actually, if you look at the ability of a leader to motivate staff, work well across cultures and adapt to change, the numbers will take care of themselves. So again, I make the point, technical competence can be trained. A lot of people can do it. Bringing that EQ, the ability to inspire, to sell a vision, to mobilize people. We've got the greatest example of the world in our country here in South Africa, someone that could unite, speak cross-culturally, speak cross-generationally, and you can see the results that can be achieved. Look at my own country now, the shame I have of looking at a group of leaders that are so disconnected. What we would give for a Mandela, an Obama, a Trudeau right now, and maybe a leader will rise, but they're speaking to such a narrow group. Nobody understands the vision, and that's why we're getting nowhere. You can see that in your own organizations, your own lives, when the chief exec comes to talk, gets the 100 people in front of him and starts talking about optimizing profit margins. Gets everybody going, doesn't it? The receptionist gets really excited about that. You've got to be able to articulate that vision. And technical competence, it's not that important. My research of the last 3 years, talking to leaders around the world, did this on 5 continents. The greatest honor in my job is firstly being part of an individual's career decision to decide what they're going to do next. Arguably, it's one of the top 3 things they're going to decide in their life. Marriage, buying a house, children, career, right up there. So we're very close to that decision, but also talking to leaders around how they've been affected, how they failed, and that one-on-one dialogue can be very meaningful. But essentially, resilience comes up. Leadership is hard. Running a team is hard. Running a business is harder. It's very lonely, and there's no getting away from that. If you want to lead, get tough. There's just no way of putting that in a nice way other than saying, bloody hard work, you've got to be robust. And I look at some of the CEOs I deal with behind closed doors. They've got to go into a shareholder meeting, they've got to give the results, they've got several disciplinaries and grievances to deal with, and then their wife's on the phone or the husband's on the phone and the kids. There's so many things to balance. It is tough, and that's the nature of the role. Vision. I talk about a vision. So the mission is what you have to do every day. What numbers do we need to achieve to keep the revenue coming in? But the vision is how you get that extra percentile out of somebody. When your employees are stuck in William Nickel in traffic at 5:30 in the morning, why are they getting out of bed to come into work? They know what the role is, but what is the higher purpose? What is the vision? Where is it? Henley's got some great visions around the place. Building the leaders that build the business that build Africa. And if your security guard and receptionist feels that they're contributing to that, then you're probably onto a good thing. I had 7 meetings in Durban in the last 24 hours with one of my less experienced colleagues. And I said, observe how the security guard treats you, the receptionist, and then how the CEO behaves and how effective that company is. It's incredible That when the security guard's eating the food, chatting to their friends and won't talk to you, you go in the CEO's office and it's not hugely impressive. When the receptionist can't go out and do enough to help you, you go to the top floor and the exco are hugely inspiring. It's not an accident. It cascades across the organization. Make people feel that their, what might be a mundane role contributes to the greater good of society. And that's what selling a vision is. People, you've got to deal with them. You want to work for yourself, great. Be a programmer in your room by yourself. But if you're going to lead and be an organization, you have to like people. You can't pretend to like people. You can for a few weeks and then you have a nervous breakdown. You can't do it. So you've got to like people. And optimism, particularly in the African continent, particularly in our country right now, I think is key. Fear is a perfectly useful and valuable emotion. Panic and pessimism, there's just no room for them. No room for them at all. They don't help anybody. It's not about being naive. Fear drives action. Fear drives concern. Pessimism just brings people down, and panic just makes you ineffective. And you can train. You look like you're panicking there. No? Good. Panic you can train. Surgeons, firemen, ex-soldiers, when you're under fire, you need to know, now my brain's kicking in because someone's shooting at me, but I can't panic because I'm going to let the side down. It's the same in business. Nene Gate, Brexit. These are just things we have to navigate as leaders. So it's fearful, it's uncertain, but leaders make a plan and they inspire those around them. And I won't drill this down, but principles, and I'll call that values. One of my most memorable lectures when I was at Royal Military Academy Sandhurst was by a chap called Surgeon Commander Rick Jolly. He was a Navy surgeon, and he tells a story during the Falklands War when he was in a helicopter and there's a man drowning in the freezing South Atlantic Ocean near Antarctica. He jumped out of the helicopter, and he pulled this guy out and got him in. Then he got back in the helicopter and there's another guy in the sea and he was freezing. He was becoming hypothermic. But he jumped in the water again and pulled him out. And he says, why do we do these things? And he said words which resonate with me every day when I'm feeling a bit down. When I shave in the morning, I need to like who I see in the mirror. And that speaks to me every day. If you can't be proud about what you're doing, it's going to be bad for your health, number one. But secondly, and before that kicks in, you're not going to be truly authentic. You're never going to self-actualize and you'll do a less capable job. And people will sense that you don't like what you're doing. So you have to pick a vehicle, an organization, something you believe in to be truly effective because you can't pretend for so long. And then clearly those things are very, very obvious. Courage, it's tough, you've got to communicate, and cultural sensitivity speaks to being a global citizen. In South Africa, I thought I was quite a diverse guy. I'm half Nigerian, I'm half English, I've got a French wife. Come to South Africa, what could be more difficult? I'm diverse. It took me 6 months to realize nobody understood me in my business. The Afrikaans, the English, the black girls, the black guys. And I just realized I've really got to constantly make an effort to communicate. I might think I'm diverse, but in London, I am. In Joburg, I've got a lot to learn. And I imagine if I go to Rwanda, Kenya as well, you've got to be aware that you don't know everything to make that effort. And good leaders do that. And very quickly, I'm going to move on from this, but I think we'll just focus on the two. 4 V's, classic MBA speak. Value delivery system, how you deliver the model, value proposition, what you're selling. But the first two are the most important. The vision. What is our higher purpose? What are we trying to achieve? And you're going to be surprised when I suggest we talk about this with our children. I do with my kids. The mission is what we need to achieve every week. So when you're not there, your team know how they have to operate to function. But when you're not there and they're feeling down, they need to be motivated, they know what the higher purpose is. My job is to find the leaders and to help Africa grow their businesses. And that means I'm going to make this coffee with a smile on my face. And I joke, but that's what you want to get out of your people. And you can do. Do you know the NASA scenario? It's a great story. It's a true story. Talking about alignment and organizational culture and performance culture. President's visiting NASA headquarters. He's meeting the astronauts. What do you do? I fly the shuttle. What do you do? I'm the scientist. And there's a guy sweeping the floor. And he said, what do you do? And he said, I'm the man that puts the man on the moon. Because he believes by him doing his role, he's contributing to the mission of getting the man on the moon. NASA then sadly had a terrible culture shift culminating in several disasters. But in the early days, they were so aligned. Their vision was clear. It was a wonderful performance culture. Essentially, what we're looking for is transformational leadership. So going beyond the transactional management piece and moving into really talking to an individual's highest self and getting the best out of them and making them feel good about it. And we've all known people that can do that, and we all know people that have the complete opposite effect on you. You get the email, ping, it's from him or her, and you're like, ugh, straight away. They walk in the office, ugh. None of us actually want to be that person. So if we're self-aware, we might know we're going to have a bad day. We're going to pump ourselves at that one day to make the effort when we go in. Oh, well, you know what I say to my guys? Just go home. Don't come in when you're like that. You bring the whole place down. And Steve Jobs, self-aware, yes. Nice person, not really. But he knew he had to surround himself by decent leaders to get the best. A visionary, not necessarily people-centric, but he surrounded himself by people that could do that. And if you've read the book and seen the movie and seen the case studies, much of it is true. So as I move on, I think as leaders, there's certain things that you have to do. 3 things in business, I say to my guys, the 3 tenets of leadership. Firstly, you need to keep the lights on every week because you can be inspiring, you can get people behind you, but then if you can't pay their salary at the end of the month, your credibility is gone. You don't get a second chance to recover from that. You've got to deliver the business plan. Secondly, you've got to communicate what we're trying to achieve as a mission and a vision and what that person's role is within it. Simple stuff. And the third thing, which I love, and if you want to get the best out of your people, is connect with them, get to know them. What did they want to do when they were 8 years old? What is the dream for their life? And you say, by working with me for 2-3 years, I'm going to get you one step closer to that dream. I hope it's in my organization, but it might be somewhere else. But you do a good job for me, and we're going to help you develop you towards that dream. And see the extra work and engagement you can get from that person. I had a young lady that wanted to be an actress. I really struggled trying to make her better at that, but I tried my best. And I think it's key that you set the culture and a performance culture. And culture, again, can transcend itself into our family life. And you go into some people's homes and their kids, and it's a happy, vibrant, anything can happen. You go into other people's homes and the kids can't move without being shouted at. And every time they have an idea, it's cut off. Don't be ridiculous. You're not going to be a social entrepreneur. You're going to be an engineer. And you can sense this culture, and we've probably all been guilty of it at some point, and I'll come on to that. But culture, there's some lovely academic theories here that Andrew will be very proud of me for putting them up there. But I'm going to put a few of my own up. Interestingly, Simon Collison was my neighbor. He used to work head of international at Henley. He now is dean of the Birmingham Business School, which is where David Gill, the ex-chief exec of Manchester United, also went, but not as good as Henley. I'll just say that. And also culture in a global society. How do you cascade one culture across an international organization? And I put this up there in terms of one of the key elements I'm going to talk about for our kids is they've got to become global citizens, open to the world, and know how to communicate. And I put this up here, this 2x2 matrix. If you go along the bottom of the x-axis, you'll see it's societies with very open expressive values. Along the y-axis, it's secular religious values. And at the bottom left, highly survived values. If we look at Maslow, we're talking about the entry level there. And we're looking at traditional values. So I did a paper and I nearly got in trouble. I was trying to link this to GDP performance. And my professor told me I was social engineering. But I thought it was interesting because we can learn a lot from Sweden, very effective society, high GDP, second highest suicide rate in the world. Zimbabwe, we all know what's going on there politically. A few years ago, had the best education system in the world. But when you're trying to talk about culture, it's not about undermining individuals' cultures. It's about finding an organizational culture that embraces the diversity of your team. And that's why London was, and hopefully will remain, a great city. You can walk from one office to another office, you'll hear 15 languages spoken, and nobody cares. You see mixed race relationships, no one bats an eyelid, and it's one of the most successful cities in the world. So I believe in the strength of diversity. But what Manchester United do, for the third time that I mention, they take people from Africa, Brazil, China, North America, Southern Europe, and they put them into an organization, and people get the history and culture of that place. So they know where they're coming from, they know their history, but they bring their African athleticism and flair, they bring their Southern European swagger, and they add to that culture, but they make it very clear. And that's, again, I strongly believe in that. Now, I worry with Jose Mourinho. Any Chelsea fans in the room? I won't hold that against you. You know, Jose Mourinho coming in, I believe he believes in winning at all costs, which as shareholders may value, but as somebody that's loved this club for nearly 40 years, I'm worried about the values that I believe in that Sir Bobby Charlton started. But anyway, enough about sport. I'm going to go through this very quickly, but building a winning culture is very basic. And It really isn't complex. It's doing a lot of very simple things, but communicating them. Ultimately, you've got to connect in yourself and connect with your team and understand that winning in business is not an option. We did a lot of work with the London Olympics, and I had the chief exec of Manchester United, the chief exec of the UK Athletics, and they talk about how proud they are of getting silver and bronze medals, coming in the top 4 of the league table. And my chairman at the time said, the thing is in business, we pitch, we go for a tender, there's 5 companies, and we come second, and we get really good feedback. But when you come second, you get 0 revenue. If you're selling a product, and your product's really, it was in the top 3, but nobody buys it, you don't get any revenue. Then you can't pay your team. And when I was in the military, I never understood why civilians could get stressed. No one's shooting at you. No terrorists are chasing you. You've just got to go and do some marketing. You've got to go and do an HR report. And then actually, having run businesses for the last 12 years, when the money stops coming in, you're looking at the peoples who look to you to make sure you make the right decision so they can pay their healthcare, their bond, their children's school fees, realize their own dreams. And it's an even greater pressure because it's not immediate. When it's shooting at you, you get it right, you get it wrong. You get it wrong, nobody really has a go at you about it, you're a hero. You get it wrong in business, you're a complete failure. And you look at those people every day and feel that responsibility to them. So I believe it's essential everybody has a strong appetite to win, because if you don't, you start failing. And if we don't win more than we lose, our business will fail. And I did this exercise with my team. I say, tell me who your heroes are. Tell me what your favorite movie is, what your favorite book is, your favorite piece of music. Because I don't believe anybody aspires to mediocrity. And when you really dig deep inside and start getting them to be honest, they all admire winners, but some of them are scared to try to win. So you've got to extract that winning value from yourself, but from your team as well, because in business, it's not an option. The moment you start losing, and let's not talk about political parties, elections coming up in a few weeks, the moment you start losing, it's very hard to turn it around. Get away from the organizational politics. You've got to think about your clients, what your people want. And if everybody thinks like an owner, you'll make good decisions. This is a quote, and it's a bit of my Anglo-Saxon and Afrikaans. And I do these workshops with excos, and we go off to the bush. And invariably, after 3 days of getting to know each other and putting through their paces, they always adopt this JFDI. There's a lot of talking in South Africa. There's a lot of talking in business. There's paralysis by analysis. JFDI stands for just do it. And there's an Afrikaans variation. There's an English variation. Both are equally abrupt and drive a sense of direction. But we can think about things for years. We can have breakout workshops, but you've got to get on with it because the world is changing. What was right 2 weeks ago might not be right now, and you may miss the opportunity. You've got to work in a team, and if you're not passionate and energetic about it, well, you're going to spend a lot of time at work. Your team are as well. Your kids are going to spend a lot of time at school, so you might as well be passionate. And energy, I talk about energy sappers, energy suckers, then people that walk in and you feel their energy and you're lifted. And you might be intimidated by it, but you know you've got to do something. If all of us take that view, when we go into a room, we're going to give our energy out there, everybody will become more effective. And I always say, you can't do it with a smile on your face, don't bother. Go home till you come back with a smile on your face. We all have bad days, but 80% of the time, we should aim for that. Anyway, some things there. I won't go into it. Just essentially, having fun, I think, is really good if you can. And don't be afraid to delegate. So for our children, I was at my son's at boarding school down in KZN, and one of my greatest surprises of life in South Africa, and I had planned to go and work. I was working in London. I got a job in Geneva, one in Singapore, running a business. And somebody said, oh, there's a problem in our South African office. Do you want to go? I said, no, thank you. My view of South Africa was my father studied South African politics. He was an African. He was in the movement over in the UK. We used to go outside Mandela House, and we used to say free Mandela, and I thought that was quite fun. But I just remember lots of violence on TV. I remember booing the Springboks and all those other things. I thought, well, I've never been before. Let's just go and have a look. And then I can say, I'd rather go to Singapore. And within 24 hours of landing in Joburg, and this is in 2012, I couldn't believe, number one, weather's great, beautiful people, quality of food, wine, but just the sense of opportunity, the welcoming, how delightful people live here. You know, there's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of poverty everywhere, but there's a lot of people living very well. And I thought, wow, what a great place. I can certainly make a go of living there. Then I looked at the schools, and okay, not all schools are great, but the private schools that are affordable compared to Europe are amongst the best in the world. And there's so many good things. But I was at my son's school, and what I like about South African schools, a lot of them embrace African robustness and resilience with some of the old school Anglican and Catholic stuff that we're not allowed to do in Europe anymore. And at my son's school, they spend a lot of time developing the individual. So the academics are there, but it's not everything. But they talk about the deal has changed. And you might be able to see I'm quite an overbearing parent. You know, I set my son 5-year goals and we review them regularly. Probably not much fun for him. But the teachers tell me, and I see some of you do that here in the room as well, but the teachers tell me the deal has changed, which means doctor, engineer, accountant, lawyer. That's not the only show in town anymore. And they talk about the other opportunities. They say, much like the Industrial Revolution, 50% of the jobs that we have now will not exist in 9 years' time, which is scary. And Alvin Toffler actually died today. He wrote Future Shock in the 60s. He actually predicted the internet and the way the information revolution would take place. And when you look at Africa, you're often looking to the future. So I read a lot of the futurist books, and Clem Santa, and he just depresses me because he always says the country's about to fall over. He's been saying it since I've been here. So I've kind of stopped listening. But there's some great books about the future. But I read a great book called The Next 100 Years. I'll have to tweet the name. And it shows how the world is changing. And so the way we were trained and educated and socialized, much of it is no longer relevant for our children. And, you know, as somebody that advises businesses and leaders how to get the best out of their skill set, I often take this home, and my poor 15-year-old son, you know, has to sit down and listen to me. I can see his eyes glazing over as I start. But, you know, trying to tell them what are going to be the critical skills. And I've got a theory, but Nikki Bush, she was at some business school recently, some secondary business school, Gibbs or something. I've never heard of it. Anyway, she was there, and actually she's a very good speaker, and she was talking about what's going to be required for the future. And sadly, it's impossible to predict what those jobs are going to be. So right now, I'd say to my son, be a data scientist, go into fintech in Cape Town, you'll make a fortune. And there are lots of beautiful people there, and you'll have a great time. But in 10 years' time, that's probably going to change. So what we need to do is give them the skills and the ability to navigate those changes. And there are ways of doing that. But a lot of the learning in Western Europe, North America, is about learning things by rote. We don't need to do that anymore. You know, I remember we used to have great debates as a kid. Who was in that movie? What happened in that? What was the date of that battle in history? Now my son's told me before I finish asking the question because he's got it on his phone. You know, whereas before I was proud of knowing everything about the Russian Revolution in 1917 and the previous one in 1905. But he doesn't need to know that. They need to know how to be creative. And this isn't my thinking, but I believe in it. How to constantly be learning. And again, I say, as leaders, the world is constantly changing. The generations are different. Who has fun here trying to manage millennials? You know, it's a constantly moving feast. What worked with people with my skill sets and values, command and control a little bit, tell them where to go, and not how to do it. Millennials are very different. They come and sit on your desk and say, when am I going to be the CEO? Make me a coffee. And you think, God, but I need these people in my business. So how can we get the best out of them? So we've got to be students of leadership, but we've also got to make sure our children have that love of learning and the understanding that because they got their matric and an undergrad, they don't stop there. In the old days, you do actuarial science or CA, whatever it is, engineering, get in the job, you stay there for 20 years. They're going to have 4 or 5 careers on average, and that's a conservative view. Resilience, I think, is a theme that I see so much resilience in this country compared to some of the pampered kids that I've seen in Europe. And I live in Danefern, and there's some pampered kids up there, but actually not all of them are. You know, there's some really good social commitments, going into the community, 50-kilometer hikes overnight. You know, even the unfit kid that's not good at sport does it because he doesn't want to let his team down. That's stuff we don't do in Europe anymore. That robustness and resilience. When I was in the British Army, we had a lot of guys, black and white, from Zimbabwe come and join the British Army because of what Uncle Bob was up to. And I just remember how robust and resilient. They were so much tougher than we were because of the way they'd been raised in Africa. And I think that's a strength. We shouldn't lose that. That's a real skill set we can give them. Self-awareness, authenticity. If you're constantly trying to make other people happy by how many likes you have on Instagram or Facebook, you can only join my gang if you've got a PlayStation 4. None of that stuff matters. We know this. But a lot of the people in this room, our children are growing up in that environment. Then you drive past Deep Slot or Alex and you think, what is going on in the world? Teaching them to know who they are and what's important. And that interrelatability across all cross-sections of society. And one of my biggest critiques of South Africa, and you'll detect I'm a big lover of this country, is the global lens that a lot of young South Africans don't have. So when I talk to my young South Africans who are 24, 25 in my business, bright, beautiful, dynamic, but they see the world this way because they've not done a gap year in Thailand, Australia, or Europe. And I find people that have traveled, they actually appreciate South Africa so much more because they realize what we do have here, what the opportunity is, how good life is, compared to living in a tiny flat in rainy London, but it's great because it's London. But really valuing it, but also learning that actually, once you've traveled a bit, you realize the race stuff just falls away. I grew up third generation mixed race. My dad moved from Nigeria to England in 1948 and married a white lady. And in those days, everyone was just polite because it was so strange. Oh, it's interesting. You're Nigerian. Then mass immigration started in the 60s and 70s and it changed. And I fear we're going into a bit of a phase like that in England right now. But once you've traveled the world a bit and realized that in connectivity, the things we have in common, all that falls away and it becomes much easier to progress. So I thought this was great examples, but lessons for us, and we're probably all guilty of this, and I certainly am. I read an article on the way here around the best parents are the laziest parents that don't organize all the extra activities for little Johnny, little Sipo, all our kids. And I think of my 9-year-old goes from rugby to karate to swimming to out of the box. And they say, just let them play and be a kid. They want you to be around and near them, but we're constantly trying to structure activities. So actually, they don't really think for themselves how to entertain themselves. And in South Africa, we don't have public transport, so we're driving them or someone's driving them. So it doesn't really help them in terms of their robustness and growing. And create that time to be with our kids as much as we can. They learn so much from us. I wanted my 15-year-old to be sat in the audience tonight, but when I showed him the picture of him doing his first shaving, he said, I'm not coming, it's so embarrassing. But actually just being with us, they say a lot of dads, I have 2 sons, if you have daughters, just driving them around, being there, listening to them talk to their girls, that has such a positive impact. And the learning they get about how we engage with each other, how we engage with our staff, they learn so much from that. And you can tell, I do a lot of mentoring for underprivileged kids, and it's hugely rewarding, but some of the social lessons that we take for granted, they haven't had. We can do that by being present. And the fact we're all here talking about it means we all want to do it. But when you've got a paper, a deadline, we went on holiday recently and we landed on the plane and I checked my phone. My son's like, you promised me you weren't going to do that. I can't actually remember promising that. But they notice, they feel like you're not connected to them. So we schedule less. That's what I believe, and I feel very privileged to have worked in 5 continents around the world, worked with some great people. My organization, we give a lot of scholarships to underprivileged kids. We spend a lot of time working in underprivileged schools because I believe in responsible capitalism, and I believe the type of people that want to do that with me are the type of people I want in my business, and we learn a lot about ourselves. So I've done this. I was just at World Service last night. I spent some time in Belize in Central America. Very, very poor country, and it was actually just reminding me about these issues are global. They're not just local. But our kids need to have strong vision and values. And you might laugh, but I say when I'm mentoring youngsters that don't know what they want to do, I say, close your eyes. What is the vision for your life? I don't know, engineering, accounting. What does your life look like? Where are you living? What is your house like? And it comes to, I want to be able to pay my mum back. I want to be able to make sure we've got healthcare. I want to be able to go on holiday at least once a year. So that's a vision. You can see it. And let's start working backwards. You're going to get that working at McDonald's. And we giggle, but we get to a point saying, yes, we have to learn and progress and pick a profession to start with, because that's going to give us that economic freedom to fulfill our vision. But if we've got our strong values, which really is the culture, the performance culture that we set at home, they know about right and wrong and they're going to stay on track. So you can always sense check yourself. And we develop this gut feeling when we're doing something that's really counter to who we are. And we're not right. And we can give our kids this by constantly giving those valuable lessons. Make sure they mix cross-culturally. Make sure they realize how lucky they are. There's always somebody luckier. There's always someone less lucky. The importance of sharing. And I think if you give them that strong value set, that moral compass, when, God forbid, we're no longer there, they're going to be okay because we've given them that moral compass. And that's the authenticity and sense of self to say, I, Leon Ao, my son, I know who I am. I know where I come from. I know my heritage. It's African, it's European. But this is what I believe in. This is what my father taught me. This is what my mother taught me. What my grandfather taught me. And actually, even if you don't have a great legacy of people in your life, you can learn that from mentors, from lecturers, from coaches. And I think, actually, you get those things right, they're going to be okay. Global citizens, it's a global world. And despite Britain voting for Brexit, it's going to be I'm so angry. It's going to be an even more interconnected world. You've got to understand where South Africa fits in. When Brexit happens, it has an impact on us here. When Trump gets elected, it has an impact on us here. that connectivity, but also how to communicate cross-culturally. I'm hugely encouraged by the youngsters at the business schools. My au pair and a kid I mentor from Soweto, white girl, very privileged, black guy, not so privileged. We go for dinner. They've got so much in common. It's just 19-year-olds, they don't care. So much in common. You've got to bring them together so they actually see what they do have in common. Then they go and take my kids out to the movies or whatever it is. We can just do that by bringing people together and making sure we can communicate. And when you go overseas, you get so much more confidence to do that in a foreign language, in a foreign culture. And then you see another South African that might be someone from the Eastern Cape and some Afrikaner from the Free State. But you realize how much you do have in common across the world. Empathy, understanding where people are coming from. As leaders, it's key. But also, as human beings growing up, the more you can empathize with other people around you, the better friend you're going to be, the easier time at school will be. And again, critical thinking, ability to adapt to change. We cannot predict what skills are required. But if your kids have the self-confidence that they can learn should the situation change, the plan changes, they understand, right, the world's going this way, I need to retrain in this. And they've got that confidence to say, whatever is intellectually thrown at me, I can retrain in it. I was about 26 when I actually got over all my subconscious inadequacies, be it around mathematics or something that was a bad experience at school, and realized, actually, whatever I need to learn, I can find a way to learn it. If we can teach our kids that ability to say, so whatever happens, I'm confident in my ability to navigate that, and I will go and learn because I've got this love of learning, I can think critically, they're going to be okay. And playing to win. I've talked about the importance of winning. The point playing if you're not trying to win. That's the way I see that. But it's not winning at any cost, and it's learning from failure and learning. I'm an old school, Englishman who used to always say, we're so good at losing. Well done, chap. My 15-year-old son, he's so English, even though he's half French. Some Afrikaan, he plays rugby. Some Afrikaan boy knocks him down and stands on his head. He'll get up, oh, good tackle, well done. Go get him. Go and get him back. So it's that balance between competing, because it's a tough world out there, but not losing yourself, what your values are. And the 3 Fs, Bear Grylls. He was actually an ex-military guy, so we overlapped and spent some time together. And he talks about the 3 Fs, and it's family, friends, and faith. And I think if you've got that, and I'm not a Christian, but I believe in faith, and I believe we have different religions. I've been around the world involved in conflicts where religion's been the cause of that conflict. But I believe faith is key. Faith in humanity, faith in self, faith in your religion can really be a point of centralizing you. But if you've got that, it kind of helps realign what your value. You always know where your values are. And whatever goes wrong, you have the faith that you're going to come through it. And that ties in with resilience and optimism. We can all stay in bed saying we're doomed. We're doomed. Oh, Zuma's never going to go. We're doomed. Oh, the Rand's tanking. Bring back Nene. I bought this business or a controlling share in this business the day Nene got fired. And the day my wife turned 40, I bought the business, Nene got fired, and I was watching the Rand. No, it's never gone past 20, it has now. It's never gone past 23, it has now. And I'm there driving to the bush for my wife's birthday, trying not to panic, because I'm trying to practice what I preach. Switch my phone off. Monday morning, switch my phone on. Pravin Gordon's back. Yeah. Have faith. Have faith. But on that as well, be adventurous and make your kids adventurous. Because if you're adventurous, you're going to become resilient and robust. Yeah, it's great if they're good at maths, but get them climbing mountains, skiing, scuba diving. Get them to go and buy a business in Africa when everyone tells them it's not a place to go, because you learn so much about yourself and what that gives you. If you're not a confident public speaker, if you're not confident in one area, if you go and climb a mountain, conquer your fear of heights, those emotions, they come to bear when you need them most. So you're going into pitch and you don't like, or a board meeting, you don't like it, but yeah, I climbed up Lion's Head. I parascended. I was scared of sharks, but I went shark diving. Get your kids out there to be adventurous, and all these other areas that will bring to bear. So, obviously, I apologize. This is a bit of a these are all the things my business does, but I will not talk about them. The leadership piece I love, the coaching. But I think one of the most important things, and particularly as leaders, and particularly as African leaders, we've got to be optimistic about the opportunity we have. We've got to stop looking at the rest of the world and saying we're not good enough, because the rest of the world has as many problems as we have, and we're a young democracy, and we can fast track and learn these lessons. So I actually put this up there, and I want to go around. Can we name all these people? Shout out. See, she's an amazing leader. I'd be terrified to be married to her, though. Oh, she would. So the rest of them are all South African. Rolene Strauss. So not just because she's beautiful and Miss Universe, she's a medical student. She's going to be a doctor. Very smart. Who's this? Yeah, he's doing quite well. I'm not political, but I love what he represents. The new South Africa. One of the bravest women, perhaps, in the world right now. If anybody gets this, I'll be impressed. This is the richest doctor in the world. He has a company that develops smart drugs that find cancer cells and attack them. He's a multi-billionaire from Port Elizabeth, educated at Wits. Why don't we talk about him in South Africa? Patrick Soon-Shiong, South African, richest, most successful doctor in the world, not only financially, but he has a foundation that has a non-profit element getting these cancer drugs. And this white dude down here, I don't know his name, but my faith has been tested several times in this country. When we started attacking immigrants, it was very ugly. I was very uncomfortable. I've been an immigrant my whole life, wherever I've gone, and I've always felt that if you go somewhere and work hard, try and adapt, learn the language and the culture, people will accept you wherever you go. And that was my experience, my grandfather's experience when he came from Africa. When he started attacking the Mozambicans, the Zimbabweans, I got very, very, very nervous. And then when the students started throwing poo at statues of Rhodes, I thought that's not the most eloquent protest. However, fees must fall. I mentor a young guy at Rhodes. He's a young lad from Soweto. And he was leading the student protest. And he was sending me clips and videos of the rubber bullets and the smoke. And I said to him, listen, I've been in these scenarios. Are you just doing this for fun? What is your argument? And he gave me such an articulate, structured argument. And he told me how he got consensus, crossed the racial lines, the social lines. I just said, right, I back you, go for it. And this white dude just kind of summed it up for me. You had the white young South Africans standing in front of their brothers and sisters of color saying, you're going to get to them, you've got to get through us. And actually they showed us, the Generation X and Y, be optimistic, challenge the government, challenge the powers that be, embrace innovation, and they won. I just think we could all learn from that. It was hugely inspiring. In conclusion, optimism. I always say, I'm in a global business. I live here. I cover this area. I'm from here, and I've worked all around here. Right now, we're surrounded by double-digit growth GDP. We have a positive GDP. Europeans flatlining. They're having existential crises. They're letting people, refugees, die in the Mediterranean, which is disgusting from a humanitarian perspective. But give me this market to play with this useful demographic that we've got, this growing continent, and what can we achieve? It took Europe 400 years to be semi-coherent. We're already ahead of them. What can we achieve? I find that hugely optimistic. I was very optimistic about the Americas, but let's see. I can't get excited about Hillary, but she's no doubt better than Donald Trump. We need a Trudeau. Talked about this as agile leaders. I think in conclusion, leadership, parenting, optimism, they're key. As a leader, the moment people stop bringing you your problems, you stop leading them. So when you're really tired and bored and someone's got a problem because they need an extra 100 rand on their salary because they can't pay their healthcare, remember that's you leading them. When your kids stop talking to you about them falling out with their friends because they've not got a PlayStation 4 and you've got to buy it for them and you want to, but we don't. We listen to them. It's leadership. One of my role models, Colin Powell. And education, and I get goosebumps as I look at that and we think about the example. We think about essentially everything we've spoken around in terms of being an agile leader, in terms of preparing our kids for the future. We're just educating them, giving them the tools to navigate the change that is coming. We don't know what that change is, but we've given them the tools to navigate that. And another hero of mine, and he was quite a naughty man, but he was a very good civil rights leader. Again, it's about education, and not in the traditional context of learning dates, figures, math, learning how to learn, being a student of life, a student of leadership, constantly being open, constantly being critical and confident in yourself to the values and the vision of the world we've given our kids, the faith they're going to have in humanity, to keep wanting to move forward, even when sometimes it's just bloody hard work and you think you're getting nowhere. So it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, sharing some of my insights. I welcome any questions, and if there are none, I hope there are a few. I just wish you all the best in your journeys, your professional journeys. The most important role we have in this world is raising that next generation that are our children. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you very much for a very informative talk. Coming from England, there were two major events that happened last week.
Yeah.
One was Brexit.
Yes.
The other was losing to Iceland.
Thank you so
it was
much. Thank you.
Two Brexits in 1 week. So
It was. Thank you so
can
much.
Tell us about it.
So I'll tell you that we beat Australia at rugby 3-0 for the first time, and we beat Sri Lanka 3-0 at cricket. I don't really follow any other sports apart from Manchester United. Interestingly, though, that's a lot of what's wrong with our country. You look at the English football team, it's a beautiful, diverse representation of mixed race, multiracial. The English football team collectively earn £1 million a week. So what's that? 20 million rand. The English rugby team collectively earn 7% of that. And it's equally diverse, equally talented. And you see when something is getting rotten. So actually, they lost, but they go back to their supermodel girlfriends, their mansions. There was no there's no values in our football team. And that's what's wrong. They're not bad human beings. They're good athletes. They just don't care enough. Whereas you take the Iceland team, that he was a part-time dentist. Roy Hodgson was paid 80 million rand a year. They're not bad people. Their values are wrong. They've not got a performance culture. So thank you for that example.
Any other questions, comments?
That was a bad night watching that football game. Oh, yeah.
Hi. I'm interested in your views on screen time. Now, our children are spending a lot of time on the internet. They're spending a lot of time on the tablets, playing a lot of games and Googling a lot of things. Yeah. And we are told that's not good for them.
Yeah.
However, that in that way, they know more than we do in terms of what's going on around there. So what would your comments be on screen time?
It's a really good question, and I disagree. My business partner, she's a new stepmom. She's inherited 3 kids. And she's a white lady. He's an Indian guy. She's inherited 3 Indian kids and an Indian mother-in-law. And she's really... So read into that what you will. I call them the Van Naidus, because that's what they're called. And they're great friends of ours. We've gone on holiday with them as well. And she's so old school around outside, get outside. And her husband is a CIO. So this is kind of constant friction in the marriage already. But interestingly, where the balance is right. So my boys are very, very sporty. So I insist they are. But they're better at tech than I am. So it's just about striking the balance. If they're on it all day, and I don't know what the time is, but I like the fact my kids can engage and communicate. There's a terrible thing at Hilton School. I don't know if you saw it. There was using social media, and they did reenacted an ugly scene. It was actually a fake rape. They dressed up one of the boys, and they did a fake rape scene. Because there were boys being silly, and they were sharing it on social media, and they all got expelled. They got kicked out of their varsities. They were matrics, and they're told they can't go to any varsities in South Africa. So what I do is just make social media responsibilities clear around, if you're going to tweet something, put something on Facebook, it's something you've got to be prepared to stand up in front of everybody and say. If your friends are doing things that are inappropriate, my 9-year-old, there's a boy from Cameroon and a group of kids from England, they're putting pictures of girls on WhatsApp and sending it to each other. And I always check the messages, and my wife went ballistic. No, my reaction was a bit more calm, and I just said, this is why you don't do that. And we took it to the teachers and said, it's innocent, but it might quickly become not so innocent. So it's really difficult because we grew up very differently, So I think enough so that they are connected to the generation of the technology, but they've got to be doing lots of sport and other things as well. My colleague would say 20 minutes a day. I think that's probably too harsh. I don't know what a time is, but I'd say it's the balance, getting it, and also monitoring it more for their protection. In England, we had a massive issue with paedophiles grooming kids through the tech. And you can see how it happens, particularly for 9, 10-year-olds who think they're grown up, but they're not. Yeah. So not really an answer other than just an empathy to say we've just got to stay on top of it. Yeah. My sister is a primary school teacher, and she's so extreme that I feel my nephew and niece miss out on some of the social engagements that they're excluded for some of the social stuff because my sister's so paranoid being a teacher that it can all go wrong. So you don't want to be disconnected, but you also want them to be protected as well. Yeah.
Evening, Leon.
Hello.
You mentioned several times in your discussion, you used the word resilience, and I recently heard of a book entitled Grit.
Oh, yes.
And both of them, and I'm with your military background, they make reference to the fact that military institutions are great at teaching that grit or resilience. I don't know whether there are maybe one or two bullet points that you could give. How do you develop grit and resilience, especially if you're aware that maybe that's an area of self-improvement?
I think that it's about challenging yourself, taking yourself outside the comfort zone. So I struggle. I like to stay fit, but if I've not set myself an extreme challenge, I can't get motivated. So I said, right, I'm going to do 10 events in the next 12 months. I'm going to tweet about it. So from a marathon to an Ironman. And it's the mindset you get from the military whereby constantly being taken out of your comfort zone from an early age, you get great self-confidence. So they take you beyond your point of physical, emotional, and intellectual capability. And it's much further than you think. And you've got to actually hit the wall a couple of times. Do you think you're going to hit the wall, but oh my God, I've gone for another 3 days. So how do we do that without damaging people? And also, it's a very controlled environment, military training. Not all around the world, the British Army, we still lose 10 soldiers a year dying through training. So it's, it's extreme, but it means we say train hard, fight easy. So how do I do that without destroying children? Some of the schools, they do it brilliantly. They have these, they go into the bush. They have to spend 24 hours in isolation. They have to walk 300 kilometers from the school to Lesotho and back. We don't do that in England. I think it's wonderful. The President's Award, I think it's a great thing for kids. I'm involved in that. So they have to do these outward bound days. They've also got to go into orphanages, old people's homes and give service. But I think sport's another great one. Cross country, it's not about being the best, it's about keeping going. Things like skiing, mountain climbing, you're scared of swimming, do an open water race, challenging yourself beyond your comfort zone. And I think often it's things like being involved in a drama production, doing a music recital for a kid. That has a really good impact. I'd love to take my kids away for a year and make them run around the desert and the jungle, but they're not interested, unfortunately. But I think I've not read the book yet, but I've read about it. I look forward to it. And I think there's sorts of training and intervention that I'm developing where we can do it in over a short period of time. So taking excos off to see how gritty they can be. But, it's going to be 4 days. So I completely agree with it, but also it's not for everybody. You don't want to destroy an individual because you try and do a marathon, everyone's going to do that. But I believe everybody could do it, actually. I believe they could, but they might not want to. Yeah.
Okay, well, Leon, thank you very much for sharing all that experience and insights.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're building a very interesting story or a puzzle here.
Mm-hmm.
We had Graham Codrington here last year at Family Friendly doing the generation theories.
Yeah.
And we had Nikki Bush was our previous speaker at Family Friendly.
Yeah.
And all the messages are the same. And I think we're building this picture of the world is realizing if we don't get this balance right and teaching the kids and getting them ready for what's coming, we're going to lose out. So we're trying hard at Henley to also get that message across and make it part of our culture and our ethos.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for sharing in that.
Absolute pleasure.
And helping us to get that message across. So just a small gift from Henley. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sajid. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you very much, everybody, for attending. And hope to see you at Henley again soon. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I just want to say there are people in this room. I won't ask you to put up your hands, but the bravest ones here are the ones apparently who has been in class the whole day. MBAs, and they're still here. So thank you to you especially for a long day at Henley. Thank you very much.